Okay, so hi Sarah. Let's sort of, I think I first want to get into like confidentiality and those sort of things. So just remember that this conversation will be kept like private between us unless there's mention of like a minor, like harm to a minor, in which case I'll have to inform authorities in order to keep them safe. Additionally, if you express like some sort of suicidal ideation or self-harming tendencies, we can work through a plan that'll help you kind of resolve those and like keep you safe. But otherwise, I also may have to involve the authorities. So does that sound okay with you?
Yeah, that's okay.
All right. So let's just start out then. What brought you here today?
Yeah, so I was referred by the hospital that I was just in. I was in an inpatient program for an eating disorder, which has been in my life for a while. I recently got discharged and, they want me to continue with the therapy that I was kind of doing while I was in there. And yeah, so I just kind of want to talk about that. And, I really want to prevent another relapse from happening with my eating disorder. So yeah.
All right. So can you sort of tell me a bit more about like your history with ED? Like when did it sort of pop up in your life?
Yeah, so I feel like it's always been present ever since I was little, like 7, 8 years old. I started really getting concerned about my weight and about food and body image, and just thinking that I was overweight. And my friends and there'd be pressure from friends who were thinner, and I was kind of a heavier kid, and it just made me really insecure. And I'd weigh myself a lot just to see what my weight was. And yeah, so it started really young, and then it wasn't until I was a teenager around 15 that I got diagnosed officially with anorexia. And my family was obviously noticing some patterns. They were concerned, so they wanted to get me some help. And it was around when I was a teenager that started. And then my first kind of inpatient visit was the next year, so 16. I went to the hospital, and it was a really difficult experience. I've never, it's my first time doing anything like that. So it was very like confusing and scary. And yeah, I really had a bad experience. Like the nurses and the doctors and the staff there they weren't compassionate. And it was more, they were focused on me eating. And so they were like feeding me through a tube, and that was really traumatic. And yeah, it was really difficult. And then from there, I went to a couple more inpatient programs through my teens. And just most recently, a couple months ago, went into one in my 20s now. And yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like this is something that's really like impacted you like your whole life. Like, thinking about like how this sort of started when you were young and then kind of led to, being hospitalized. Can you kind of tell me a bit more about like the hospitalization experience and like how that felt for you?
Yeah, the first one was insanely difficult. It felt very traumatic. It was abrupt. It felt like it didn't really have any outpatient kind of treatment, like therapy or anything like that. Before, I was just kind of thrown into the inpatient hospital treatment. I was still young, I was in high school, and yeah, it was really scary. I didn't feel like really safe, like with the staff there. They were, like I said, really non-compassionate, and they're just more focused on me like eating and getting like proper nutrients, and less about like the emotional aspect of it. And then being put like through on a feeding tube and stuff like that was really scary. And yeah, that really affected me. Moving forward, I felt like very upset from that whole experience. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's completely understandable to have like these very upset feelings about the experience. Like it sounds like maybe you weren't cared for emotionally, or that your feelings were sort of not taken into an account. I think, what sort of feelings did you have around that time period?
Yeah, I was feeling really down, like very depressed, really anxious about, my body image and my weight. And, I was feeling confident in myself because I was like really thin around that time. So that was probably when I felt most confident physically, because it was probably my thinness, but emotionally I was so depleted. It felt like just, yeah, like completely down, depressed. And I really didn't know what to expect going into the hospital environment and the inpatient environment. I had no kind of knowledge about it. And, I wasn't even really sure what would happen. And, with no like support there, like family or friends or anything, I was just kind of felt very alone. And yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, like it would be a very lonely and isolating experience. Like it sounds like you were already kind of feeling sort of worn out from the hospital. Like it was just a very draining experience. And like it's sort of understandable that you feel like emotionally depleted, like you said. So I guess, do you have like a specific sort of emotion that you felt during that time that maybe like connects to your present moment today? So were there any sort of like strong feelings you had back then that you feel like you're still carrying with you today?
I think one of the biggest ones is probably sadness,
Mhm.
just overall kind of sadness. And sadness around like body weight, body image, food, and just emotionally like overall sad.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think maybe as sort of a introductory exercise to kind of like work on maybe identifying these emotions and kind of working with them, why don't we try to find sort of a prompting event and like kind of work with like identifying how your feelings impact like how like your well-being and like self-regulation, because like in the EFT modality, at least the one that I'm working with, it's very important to sort of be aware of our emotions so that we can like learn from them and like use them to change like maybe some maladaptive emotions or some like negative experiences that we're having. So does that sound good with you?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
All right, so I'm going to briefly share my screen and we can work through the worksheet together.
Awesome.
Okay, so um, first, let's sort of identify maybe an emotion reaction, like lasting a few minutes to like a few moments during the week, and sort of describe like what was the prompting event. And it could be like, because you mentioned sort of a lot of sadness around food. Can you kind of remember an event like that?
Yeah, I think um, back when I was like around 12 or so, um, I felt a lot of sadness around my body image, my
Mhm.
weight. Um, and there was a certain situation where I was at a family gathering, and uh, it was a holiday and everyone was eating. And I remember a family member made a comment about my eating habits and not eating a lot. And that made me feel really upset.
Mhm. Yeah, so it's like comment that like it's about like you like eating or not eating. That
Yeah.
um, and I think based off that, what was your interpretation of like that comment in that moment?
I felt like they were pointing out my insecurity about food. And I felt like, they were kind of shedding light on it, and everyone was kind of hearing that and
Mhm.
also judging me. So yeah, I felt very judged by them. Um, and I felt very insecure because for a long time I was just trying to hide it and, you know, have it be something that nobody knew. Um, and then for someone to call it out, it was, yeah, really upsetting.
So yeah, it sounds like there was a lot of things that were sort of like brought to the front that you weren't necessarily like comfortable with, like especially when you sort of tend to, like as you said, kind of want to hide this and sort of keep it out of sight. To have someone like point it out, it would definitely be like understandable that you felt like judged. So based off that moment, at the emotion, like what was the emotion and the intensity of it on a scale of like from 0 being like not very, like not at all intense, to 100 being like completely overwhelming and very intense?
I would say the main emotion was sadness,
Mhm.
and the intensity in that moment was probably like a 70.
Mhm. So pretty high up there and predominantly sad. Can you
hmm
identify maybe like any sort of underlying emotions, sort of other emotions that may have been there, but maybe were like the dominant emotion?
I think anxiety
Mhm.
would be one of them, and that was probably like a 50.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So based off this sort of like what emotion and how intense it was, we can use this to sort of identify like how this emotion functions. So I guess, did this emotion sort of communicate something to others or influence their behavior?
hmm I felt like it was communicating to the family that I had a problem, that I was insecure, and um, kind of confirming that what that comment was saying about me not eating enough, that people knew that something was going on after that comment.
Mhm.
Um, and I felt like it influenced their behavior because they, um, I think people started to get like uncomfortable,
Mhm.
and um, yeah, they started to take notice. And then I felt like, subsequent gatherings and stuff, that it was on people's mind, or they were kind of looking at what I was eating or how I looked, um, after that comment was made.
Mhm. So it seems like it kind of like made it a lot like more aware, like it made it more obvious to other people and made it kind of like something that now people are like looking at you and like it sort of ties into like that report about anxiety, because like it would cause a lot of anxiety to have all this attention on all this like unwanted and like sort of kind of judgmental emotion and anxiety. Like that would definitely cause a lot of anxiety.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm. And yeah, like completely understandably, like there would be a lot of like sadness around that, because like you already sort of know, I guess, that it's sort of something difficult for you, and to have it be reminded is, a bit painful. And yeah.
Yeah.
So I think based on this, did this emotion sort of organize or motivate you to do something?
Yeah, I think after that was made, I kind of wanted to hide my eating habits for the most part, like, be very discreet around others,
Mhm.
um, about how I was restricting my eating or what my eating was looking like. I also felt like wanting to hide my body more so people weren't judging it.
Mhm.
Like wearing baggier clothes, or um, yeah, just trying to hide my body shape so that others weren't kind of criticizing me.
Mhm. So I guess based off this, like, did the emotion sort of give you like did the emotion sort of give you information, color your perception, or lead to any like conclusions about like, the event?
hmm Um, the information that it gave to me at the time was that everyone's judging me, um, that, I'm inherently like a bad person
Mhm.
because of what like my eating habits were like. I felt really judged, um, by others, because for the longest time it was just me criticizing myself and my body and my eating habits, and then I felt like everybody else was after that. Yeah.
So yes, the strong theme of like judgment that like it seems that you have certain like expectations of yourself for one, but also like clearly other people have these expectations for you and like will judge you if you don't meet them. And like it definitely would cause a lot of like anxiety, and it's understandable that you felt like that. So after working with this sort of like sheet, do you kind of have a better understanding of maybe like the kind of emotional aspect of that event?
Yeah, I do actually. This is really helpful to kind of break it down because I haven't really done that before. So it's nice to see like, how my emotions can have like kind of influenced my perception of myself and what I think other people think about me.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. It's very important to sort of like kind of work on these things and understand like how our emotions really affect like what motivates us and how we can sort of use them for more adaptive reasons rather than like maybe trying to like, because sort of outlining it like this, you can kind of see how your emotion made you want to like hide yourself more and made you want to like be less seen. Like, do you think that those really are things that you want to do necessarily?
Yeah, not really. I think it's just me based on what I think other people are thinking and um and how I kind of want to hide myself because I think that they're judging me and judging my body and stuff like that. And even more recently, like getting out of the inpatient program, like it was helpful to be in there, and I did end up gaining like a significant amount of weight, and I felt like that also kind of really like triggered me in terms of, if I feel like I'm getting bigger, it really like impacts me emotionally. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess kind of based off like this sort of initial like session, I think possibly things you could do for next week, if that sounds all right with you, is to sort of identify and kind of raise your awareness of like, when are you feeling emotion? What are these emotions and how intense are they? And then kind of working to build like your general awareness of emotions so we can understand like what would motivate you better, what is affecting you in this sort of way. Does that sound good with you?
Yeah, it does. It sounds
Right.
good.
Are there any other last questions, comments, other things you wanted to bring up?
Um, I guess on the topic of this worksheet and kind of like talking about family, I feel like my family, they often do make comments about body, not just me specifically, but they're they point out if someone's gained weight or if they think that they look too skinny and stuff like that. So I think that really has a lot of impact because I'm like anticipating comments to be made about my body. So even then it's like really emotional. Yeah.
Okay, well, I didn't necessarily, sorry, I didn't pick up on this sooner, but yeah, like, so can you kind of tell me more about like maybe a moment when your family kind of pointed out how like something around like you and eating?
Yeah, I think like at another like family gathering, there was a comment made about like, oh, you're so skinny, like you need to eat more, or something like along the to that effect. And yeah, I just felt like super called out and very insecure because being skinny is something that I desire to be and to achieve, but it almost was like framed as like a bad thing, like, oh, you're not eating enough, like you need to eat more. And that was like difficult to hear. And yeah.
Yeah, I imagine. Like again, sort of like being called out and like having your eating habits called out in a way that's like sort of not in line with like your personal goals for weight, like definitely feels sort of bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. I think based off that, is there any way you'd like to like incorporate that and like focus on the family aspect of like how this affects your emotions and how it affects like your eating disorder?
That's a good question. Yeah, I guess we could explore like the connection between like family, um, ideal weight and like eating habits, and then the impact on my emotions and how that kind of fuels my eating disorder, even though I have my own perceptions of that, but maybe it's influenced me over time to desire to be thin or be really hyper focused on what my body looks like because, the comments that others make.
Yeah. So I think that's a good place to start. I'm glad you sort of identified like what you would like to focus on. I think those are very good goals for this first session, and we can definitely like build on those more in the next session.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good.
All right. See you next time.
Bye.